The strongest structures do not fail because of weight. They fail because someone believes warnings are optional. The diesel engine rumbled louder as an 18-ton dump truck rolled slowly toward the narrow wooden bridge spanning Clearstone Creek. A bright yellow sign stood at the entrance where every driver could see it without slowing down. Maximum load 5 tons. The black lettering had been freshly repainted only 2 weeks earlier, and beneath it another reflective sign read Private Bridge. Authorized vehicles only. Nathan Brooks stood quietly on the opposite bank with one hand resting on the weathered wooden railing. At 43 years old, he had spent most of his career designing and maintaining rural infrastructure, and experience had taught him that steel, timber, and concrete rarely caused the greatest problems. Human pride usually did. Across the bridge, Diane Collins adjusted the sunglasses resting on top of her blonde hair and confidently waved the construction driver forward. She wore an elegant cream blazer despite the warm spring morning, her leather HOA binder tucked securely beneath one arm, as though it carried every answer anyone could possibly need. "Keep moving," she called. "We are already behind schedule." The driver slowed and pointed toward the warning sign. "Ma'am, this says 5 tons. Diane barely glanced at it. The Homeowners Association approved the work. "That bridge has held vehicles before. You will be fine." The driver looked uncertain. Nathan remained perfectly still. He did not shout across the creek. He did not step into the roadway. Instead, he quietly reached into the pocket of his work jacket and unlocked his phone. A notification glowed across the screen. Bridge monitoring system online. Load sensors active. Camera recording active. Timestamp synchronized. Nathan touched one button marked Archive Event. The system responded immediately. Recording secured. Diane noticed him standing across the bridge and smiled with unmistakable confidence. "You are still trying to stop this?" she asked loudly. Nathan answered with the same calm voice he had used during every conversation over the previous month. "I am trying to. Protect everyone who uses that bridge." Diane folded her arms. "The association has already decided." Nathan nodded once. "I understand." She expected another argument. None came. Instead, Nathan slipped the phone back into his pocket and quietly watched the truck continue forward at walking speed. The heavy tires rolled onto the timber decking as the bridge remained steady beneath the weight. Sunlight reflected across the calm water below, while birds sang from the cottonwood trees lining the creek. Everything looked peaceful. Everything looked ordinary. Several neighbors gathered along the roadside, whispering among themselves as the massive truck continued inching across the span. One elderly resident approached Nathan carefully. "Are you going to stop them?" he asked. Nathan shook his head gently. "No." The man looked puzzled. "Why not?" Nathan glanced once toward the warning sign before answering. "Because every warning has already been given." The truck reached the center of the bridge. Nathan's phone vibrated softly inside his jacket. The load sensors had automatically registered the crossing, recording the exact axle weights, the precise time, and synchronized camera footage from 3 different angles. Nathan never looked at the screen. He already knew what it would show. Diane smiled with visible satisfaction and turned towards several board members standing nearby. "See," she said proudly. Nothing happened. Before anyone could answer, 2 white county engineering vehicles turned off the main road and slowly approached the bridge entrance. Their amber safety lights flashed quietly beneath the bright morning sun. The lead pickup stopped beside the warning sign, and a county bridge inspector stepped out carrying a clipboard, a digital tablet, and a reflective safety vest. He looked first at the oversized truck resting on the bridge, then at the clearly posted 5-ton limit, and finally toward Nathan. "Good morning," he said calmly. "We received an automated overload notification from the bridge monitoring system. Can someone tell me who authorized this crossing?" The county bridge inspector remained beside the warning sign without raising his voice or making assumptions. He simply looked at the oversized dump truck resting on the bridge, compared the posted 5-ton limit with the identification number displayed on the side of the vehicle, and opened the inspection application on his tablet. Around him, the neighborhood slowly fell silent. The driver lowered his window and spoke first. "Sir, I asked about the weight limit before I crossed." The inspector nodded politely. "Who instructed you to continue?" The driver pointed toward Diane Collins. "She told me the Homeowners Association had already approved the crossing." Diane stepped forward immediately, still holding her leather binder beneath one arm. The road serves our neighborhood, she said confidently. We authorized the contractor to proceed with scheduled improvements. The inspector listened carefully before asking a single question. Does the homeowners association own this bridge? Diane hesitated for only a second. It is the primary access route for several homes. That was not my question. His voice remained calm and professional. Does the homeowners association own this bridge? Diane looked briefly toward Nathan before answering. No. The inspector entered several notes into the tablet without changing his expression. Nathan remained exactly where he had been standing from the beginning. His hands rested comfortably inside the pockets of his faded work jacket, while the gentle sound of flowing water beneath the bridge mixed with birds singing from the cottonwood trees. Nothing about his posture suggested satisfaction. He simply waited. The inspector walked toward Nathan. Mr. Brooks? Nathan nodded. Yes, sir. Are you the registered owner listed in the county bridge records? Nathan removed a neatly organized waterproof folder from the storage compartment mounted beside the bridge entrance. Inside were inspection reports, engineering calculations, maintenance logs, ownership records, and annual structural certifications arranged in chronological order. He handed the folder to the inspector without saying another word. The inspector reviewed each page carefully. The engineering certification confirmed a maximum design load of 5 tons. The annual inspection had been completed less than 3 weeks earlier. The bridge monitoring system had been approved by the county engineering department and configured to automatically report overload events. Every document carried matching signatures, dates, and permit numbers. Everything appears current, the inspector said quietly. Nathan simply nodded. One of the county engineering technicians approached, carrying a portable electronic scale reader connected to the bridge monitoring network. Sir, he reported, the system recorded the crossing at exactly 9:17 this morning. Combined vehicle weight exceeded the posted limit by more than 13 tons. Camera footage, axle readings, and timestamps have already been archived. Several neighbors exchanged uneasy glances. Harold Benson slowly removed his baseball cap and whispered to another resident. He knew this would happen. The woman beside him answered softly. He warned everyone. Diane folded her arms tightly. The bridge is still standing. The inspector looked toward the heavy timber structure stretching across the creek. Fortunately, yes. He paused before continuing. Load limits exist to protect public safety and preserve structural integrity over time. The absence of immediate damage does not eliminate the violation. Nathan quietly looked toward the bridge, but said nothing. Months earlier, he had invested thousands of dollars reinforcing aging support beams, replacing decking, installing monitoring sensors, and repainting every warning sign, so no driver could honestly claim they had not seen the restrictions. The bridge had done exactly what it had been designed to do. It had protected the people using it. The monitoring system had done exactly what Nathan designed it to do as well. It had protected the truth. As the inspector completed another section of his report, a second county vehicle arrived carrying the chief structural engineer responsible for rural bridge oversight. He stepped out, looked once at the warning sign, then at the electronic load data appearing on the tablet, before quietly asking the question that changed the entire morning. Who decided the posted engineering limit no longer mattered? The chief structural engineer studied the bridge for several quiet moments before walking slowly toward the entrance where the reflective warning signs stood clearly visible in the morning sunlight. He measured the distance from the roadway to the first sign with a laser rangefinder, photographed every marker from multiple angles, and compared the bridge identification number with the county engineering database displayed on his tablet. Nothing appeared hidden. Nothing appeared damaged. Every warning had been placed exactly where engineering regulations required. He finally turned toward the group gathered near the bridge. These signs comply with county placement standards, he said calmly. Any commercial driver approaching this crossing would have had ample opportunity to stop before entering. The dump truck driver lowered his head slightly. I saw every one of them. The engineer nodded respectfully. Then why did you continue? The driver answered honestly. I was instructed that the homeowners association had already cleared the route. Diane Collins stepped forward again. The bridge looked perfectly stable. It has handled heavy vehicles before. The engineer looked at her without judgment. Structures are not evaluated by appearance. They are evaluated by engineering calculations, inspection history, and certified load capacity. Nathan Brooks quietly remained near the railing overlooking Clearstone Creek. The cool breeze carried the scent of pine trees while sunlight shimmered across the slow-moving water beneath the bridge. He had spent years maintaining every support beam, replacing aging timbers before they became problems, and documenting every inspection with careful precision. His father had taught him that good engineering meant preventing emergencies rather than reacting to them. That lesson had guided every decision he made. The chief engineer accepted the inspection folder from the bridge inspector and carefully reviewed the documents page by page. The ownership records matched the county registry. The annual inspection had passed without deficiencies. The engineering calculations supporting the 5-ton limit had been independently certified by a licensed structural engineering firm. Finally, he opened the digital monitoring report generated only minutes earlier. 3 synchronized camera angles clearly recorded the truck entering the bridge. Embedded timestamps matched the electronic axle sensors installed beneath the timber deck. Vehicle weight exceeded the certified limit by more than 13 tons. Every measurement had been automatically uploaded to the county engineering archive before anyone arrived at the scene. Harold Benson quietly whispered to another neighbor, "That was the trap." Nathan overheard him and gently shook his head. "No," he replied softly. "It was protection." Harold looked confused. Nathan continued, "The sensors protect the bridge. The cameras protect the truth. They exist so nobody has to rely on memory or opinion." Several residents nearby fell silent as those words settled over the gathering. Diane looked toward the electronic tablet displaying the recorded data. "You expected someone to ignore the warning?" Nathan answered honestly, "I hope nobody ever would." The chief engineer closed the inspection folder and looked toward the county bridge inspector. "Please begin a formal compliance review." The inspector nodded and started documenting the sequence of events while another technician downloaded the archived recordings into the official county case file. No one accused anyone. No one raised their voice. Every step followed established procedure. The chief engineer then addressed Diane directly. "Our review will determine whether county infrastructure regulations or property access requirements were disregarded during today's crossing. Until that review is complete, no commercial vehicle exceeding the posted weight limit may use this bridge." Diane slowly looked toward the residents surrounding her. Only hours earlier she had spoken with complete confidence. Now every answer depended upon facts rather than assumptions. Nathan quietly slipped his inspection folder back into its waterproof case and secured the latch. He had not built a trap for anyone. He had simply built a system where the truth would always arrive before the argument. And as the county officials continued gathering evidence beneath the bright spring sky, the entire neighborhood began realizing that the strongest bridge standing that morning was not the one crossing the creek. It was the bridge connecting preparation, responsibility, and undeniable proof. The county officials worked methodically throughout the remainder of the morning, treating every detail as part of a routine engineering review rather than an emotional dispute. The bridge inspector measured beam deflection, photographed every structural connection, and confirmed that no immediate damage had occurred during the unauthorized crossing. The chief structural engineer stood beside the monitoring cabinet mounted near the bridge entrance, while one of the county technicians connected a secure tablet to the data recorder. Within moments, a complete timeline appeared across the screen. Every event had been preserved automatically. The system displayed the exact time the truck approached, the moment each axle rolled onto the bridge, the recorded weight on every sensor, the synchronized video from 3 high-definition cameras, and the automatic notification transmitted directly to the county engineering office. The technician quietly nodded. "The archive is complete. Nothing has been altered." The chief engineer looked toward Nathan Brooks. "Who installed this monitoring system?" Nathan answered calmly, "I coordinated the installation after last year's inspection recommended continuous load monitoring because the bridge serves private property but connects to a public access corridor." The engineer reviewed another page. "Licensed contractor?" Nathan nodded. "Yes, sir." "County permit?" Nathan handed him another document from the waterproof folder. "Included with the installation approval." The engineer smiled faintly. "Everything appears to be exactly where it belongs." Diane Collins remained silent while listening to each exchange. Earlier that morning, she had believed the discussion would revolve around neighborhood authority. Instead, Every question centered on engineering standards, ownership records, permits, certified inspections, and documented responsibility. None of those subjects could be answered through confidence alone. Harold Benson quietly stepped beside Nathan. "You prepared for every possibility." Nathan looked across the bridge before replying. "Preparation is less expensive than repairing preventable mistakes." The words lingered in the cool spring air. Nearby, the dump truck driver completed a written statement describing the conversation that had taken place before he entered the bridge. He explained that he had questioned the posted 5-ton limit, pointed directly at the warning sign, and received verbal assurance that the crossing had already been approved. The inspector accepted the statement without comment and attached it to the electronic case file. Another technician downloaded maintenance records directly from the bridge monitoring cabinet. Every monthly calibration, every software update, every inspection certificate, and every sensor test appeared in chronological order. Nothing had been skipped. Nothing had been overlooked. The chief engineer finally closed the tablet and addressed everyone gathered near the bridge. At this stage, the evidence establishes 3 important facts. First, the bridge owner properly posted the certified load limit. Second, the monitoring equipment functioned exactly as approved by the county. Third, the overload event was fully documented before county personnel arrived. He paused briefly before continuing. The remaining question is not whether the warning existed. The remaining question is why it was disregarded. Diane lowered her eyes for the first time that morning. She slowly opened her leather binder, searching through pages of homeowners association regulations before quietly closing it again. None of the documents addressed engineering authority over a privately owned bridge. Nathan said nothing. He simply secured his folder beneath one arm and waited while the county officials completed their review. Before leaving, the chief engineer handed the inspector a formal notice authorizing a comprehensive compliance investigation into the decision-making process that led to the overload crossing. "Follow the evidence wherever it leads," he said. "Assumptions have already had their opportunity. Now the facts will speak." As the county vehicles slowly departed beneath the bright afternoon sun, the bridge stood exactly as it had before the truck arrived, strong, carefully maintained, and supported by sound engineering. Yet the strongest foundation revealed that day was not hidden beneath timber or steel. It was built upon years of quiet preparation, honest documentation, and the simple decision to let truth stand on its own without ever needing to raise its voice. 2 evenings later, the Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association held an emergency board meeting inside the neighborhood clubhouse. And for the first time in many years, nearly every seat in the room was occupied before the meeting officially began. Residents who had once discussed landscaping, holiday decorations, and neighborhood events now quietly exchanged conversations about engineering reports, bridge safety, and county procedures. Nathan Brooks arrived carrying the same waterproof document folder that had rested beside the bridge only 48 hours earlier. He chose a chair near the back of the room without drawing attention to himself. Harold Benson smiled as Nathan sat down. "You could have made this much louder," Harold whispered. Nathan returned the smile. "Truth does not become stronger because someone speaks louder." At precisely 7 o'clock, Diane Collins called the meeting to order. Her usual confidence had been replaced by careful professionalism. She looked around the room before taking a slow breath. "Before we begin tonight's agenda, I need to address the events surrounding the bridge crossing earlier this week." The room became completely silent. She continued without looking away. "The county engineering department has opened a formal compliance review concerning the unauthorized movement of an overweight commercial vehicle across privately owned infrastructure. The review is based entirely on documented evidence collected at the scene." No one interrupted her. Several residents quietly lowered their eyes. Diane opened a folder containing the preliminary county correspondence. "The investigation is focused on decision-making procedures, verification of ownership, engineering compliance, and whether established warnings were disregarded before authorizing the crossing." She paused briefly before speaking the next sentence. "I approve that decision without verifying the engineering documentation." The silence grew even deeper. Harold slowly folded his hands together. Another resident quietly removed his glasses and stared toward the floor. Diane finally looked toward Nathan. "Mr. Brooks, before anything else, I owe you an apology." Nathan stood calmly. Every person in the clubhouse watched him. He simply answered, "Thank you." Nothing more. No criticism. No lecture. He quietly returned to his seat. Several neighbors exchanged surprised glances. They had expected a speech. Instead, they witnessed restraint. Diane continued. During the past 2 days, I reviewed every engineering report, every permit, every maintenance record, and every communication that Mr. Brooks provided before the crossing. Every warning was accurate. Every document was current. Every recommendation followed county standards. She closed the folder gently. I did not give those documents the attention they deserved. A homeowner raised her hand. Will the board change its procedures? Diane nodded immediately. Effective today, no enforcement action involving private structures, roads, bridges, gates, or commercial equipment will move forward until ownership records, engineering certifications, permits, and applicable county regulations have been independently verified. Another resident asked, will those procedures be available for every homeowner to review? Diane answered, yes. Transparency is now part of the policy. Nathan quietly listened without interruption. He had never wanted the meeting to become about him. He had only wanted the bridge to remain safe. Near the end of the discussion, the county bridge inspector entered the clubhouse carrying a sealed envelope. He greeted the board politely before handing the document to Diane. This is the preliminary engineering summary requested by the association. Diane read the first page silently before looking toward the room. The report confirms that the bridge monitoring system operated exactly as designed. The posted 5-ton limit remains fully supported by engineering analysis, and the owner's documentation exceeded county maintenance requirements. She slowly lowered the report. No applause followed. None was needed. The greatest change taking place inside the clubhouse was not written on any page. It could be seen in the faces of neighbors who finally understood that authority carried responsibility. Responsibility demanded verification, and genuine leadership began not with having the final word, but with being willing to let the facts speak first. 3 weeks passed before the county engineering department completed its compliance review, and by then the excitement surrounding the bridge had faded into the quiet rhythm of everyday life. Nathan Brooks returned to his familiar routine long before anyone else stopped talking about the investigation. Every morning he inspected the timber decking, checked the monitoring cabinet mounted beside the bridge entrance, reviewed the overnight sensor reports, and logged each inspection into the same weatherproof binder that had become a symbol of careful preparation rather than unnecessary paperwork. He never expected recognition for doing those things. He believed responsibility existed whether anyone noticed it or not. One cool Thursday morning, a white county engineering pickup slowly pulled into the gravel turnout beside the bridge. The chief structural engineer stepped out carrying a sealed document case, while the bridge inspector followed with a digital tablet. Nathan greeted both men with a handshake. Good morning. The engineer smiled warmly. We wanted to deliver the final report in person. Nathan accepted the envelope, but did not open it immediately. Thank you for coming. The engineer leaned against the wooden railing and looked across the creek. This bridge has become an example during our departmental training. Nathan looked slightly surprised. In what way? The engineer answered without hesitation. Not because of the overload event, because of the preparation that existed before it happened. He continued, every permit was current. Every inspection was documented. Every warning sign met specifications. Every sensor functioned correctly. Every maintenance record was complete. When questions were raised, the answers already existed. Nathan quietly nodded. That was always the goal. The bridge inspector opened his tablet and displayed the final summary. The review determined that the bridge owner fully complied with county engineering requirements at every stage. The overload crossing occurred after clearly posted warnings and documented engineering limitations had already been communicated. The monitoring system performed exactly as approved. Nathan finally opened the envelope and slowly reviewed the report. He paused only once before looking back at the engineer. I appreciate the professionalism your department showed throughout the process. The engineer smiled. Professionalism is easier when someone keeps records this well. Later that afternoon, Diane Collins arrived at the bridge carrying a thin blue folder instead of her familiar leather binder. Her expression reflected quiet humility rather than authority. She stopped several feet away and waited until Nathan finished updating his maintenance log. May I show you something? She asked. Nathan nodded. Diane handed him the folder. Inside was the Homeowners Association's newly adopted infrastructure review policy. Every page emphasized documented verification, engineering consultation, ownership confirmation, and written communication before any future action involving private property. Nathan read the final page before closing the folder. This will prevent many unnecessary problems. Diane smiled gently. That is exactly why we wrote it. She looked toward the bridge stretching peacefully across the creek. I spent years believing good leadership meant making quick decisions. Now I understand that good leadership means making informed decisions. Nathan placed the folder back into her hands. That lesson will serve your community well. She thanked him sincerely before walking back toward the neighborhood. As the afternoon sunlight reflected softly across the calm water below, several residents crossed the bridge on foot while children rode bicycles. Nearby, no one paid much attention to the warning sign anymore because everyone respected it. The bridge had not changed. The engineering had not changed. The greatest change had taken place within the people who crossed it each day. They no longer saw limits as obstacles. They saw them as promises quietly made by someone who cared enough to protect others long before danger ever appeared. And that understanding became far stronger than any argument that had once echoed across the creek. Autumn arrived gently across Cedar Ridge, painting the maple trees with deep shades of gold and crimson, while cool morning air drifted quietly over Clearstone Creek. The bridge stood exactly as it always had, solid, carefully maintained, and protected by the same 5-ton warning sign that no resident overlooked anymore. What had changed was not the structure itself, but the attitude of the people who crossed it every day. Drivers slowed before entering. Delivery companies reviewed permits in advance. Contractors called Nathan Brooks whenever questions arose instead of making assumptions. Respect had quietly replaced certainty. One Saturday morning, the Homeowners Association organized its annual Neighborhood Volunteer Day. Residents gathered near the park with work gloves, wheelbarrows, and gardening tools, preparing to plant trees, repaint benches, and repair walking paths before winter arrived. Nathan arrived early carrying extra safety vests, measuring tape, and several neatly labeled equipment cases. Harold Benson laughed as he watched him unload everything from the back of his pickup truck. You always bring twice as much as anyone else. Nathan smiled. Experience has taught me someone usually forgets something. Soon neighbors were borrowing gloves, tools, and measuring equipment from Nathan without hesitation. Nobody treated him as the man who had once challenged the Homeowners Association. They simply saw the dependable neighbor who always came prepared. Diane Collins arrived carrying coffee and breakfast for the volunteers. Instead of directing everyone from a distance, she joined a landscaping crew, helping plant young oak trees beside the walking trail. As she worked beside Nathan, she quietly said, "There was a time I thought preparation slowed progress." Nathan carefully straightened a newly planted tree before answering. Preparation is what allows progress to last. Diane nodded thoughtfully. I repeat that to every new board member now. Nearby, several younger residents listened while installing new signs around the community garden. One of them looked toward the bridge in the distance. Is it true the county still uses your bridge as an example during training? Nathan smiled modestly. They use the documentation, not the bridge. Harold grinned. That sounds exactly like something you would say. Everyone laughed softly before returning to work. Late that afternoon, another White County engineering vehicle entered the neighborhood, not because of a complaint, but because the department had scheduled a routine inspection of several rural crossings throughout the district. The chief structural engineer stopped briefly beside Nathan's bridge before greeting him with a friendly handshake. Everything continues to look excellent, he said after reviewing the monitoring system. Your maintenance logs remain among the most complete we receive. Nathan accepted the compliment politely. Consistency is easier than catching up later. The engineer smiled. That philosophy has spread farther than you probably realize. He pointed towards several nearby communities listed on his tablet. Other private bridge owners have started installing similar monitoring systems after reading our guidance based on this case. Nathan looked across the quiet creek as sunlight reflected gently on the calm water below. He had never hoped to become an example. He had only wanted to protect a bridge that connected homes, families, and everyday life. Before leaving, the engineer shook Diane's hand as well. Your revised association procedures have also been shared during community planning workshops, he said. They demonstrate how cooperation between property owners and neighborhood leadership can prevent unnecessary conflicts. Diane smiled with genuine gratitude. We learned that lesson because someone remained patient when he had every reason not to. Nathan simply looked toward the bridge while children rode their bicycles safely across the nearby pedestrian path, and neighbors greeted one another with easy conversation. The strongest change in Cedar Ridge had never been written into county reports or homeowners association policies. It lived quietly inside ordinary people who had learned that trust grows strongest wherever humility, preparation, and respect are allowed to cross the same bridge together. The first snowfall arrived just after Thanksgiving, covering the banks of Clearstone Creek with a quiet blanket of white, while Cedar Ridge settled into the slower rhythm of winter. Frost sparkled across the wooden bridge each morning, and the familiar 5-ton warning sign reflected the pale sunrise exactly as it had every day since Nathan Brooks first installed it. The bridge had become so ordinary again that most people no longer thought about the morning when county engineers, overloaded trucks, and neighborhood arguments had all converged in the same place. That was precisely how Nathan preferred it. His goal had never been to become the center of attention. His goal had simply been to make certain everyone reached the other side safely. Early one Saturday, a moving company arrived to help a young family relocate into one of the homes beyond the creek. Before sending their largest truck across the bridge, the company's supervisor parked beside the entrance and walked toward Nathan, who happened to be inspecting the monitoring cabinet after completing his weekly maintenance log. "Good morning," the supervisor said politely. "We reviewed the county records before scheduling today's move, but I wanted to verify everything with you personally." Nathan smiled and accepted the folded site plan. Together they reviewed vehicle weights, axle configurations, delivery timing, and alternate unloading options. Within minutes they agreed to transfer the heavier furniture onto 2 smaller trucks waiting nearby. The supervisor shook Nathan's hand. "It takes a little longer this way." Nathan nodded. "It also keeps everyone safe." Several neighbors watched the conversation from nearby driveways. "Harold." Benson smiled quietly. "That entire discussion lasted 5 minutes," he said. "A few months ago we would have argued for an hour." Diane Collins happened to be walking through the neighborhood collecting donations for the community holiday food drive. She paused beside Harold and looked toward the bridge. "The difference is that everyone now begins with facts instead of opinions." Harold nodded. "It feels like common sense now." Diane smiled gently. "Sometimes common sense has to be learned." The moving crew carefully followed the agreed plan, unloading furniture onto the smaller vehicles before crossing the bridge one at a time. Everything proceeded smoothly. Children from the neighborhood even helped carry lighter boxes into the family's new home, while parents offered hot chocolate to the workers standing in the cold afternoon air. Watching the scene unfold, Nathan quietly returned to updating the maintenance log inside the monitoring cabinet. He did not supervise the move because he no longer needed to. The process itself had become stronger than any individual. Later that afternoon, the county bridge inspector stopped briefly while conducting another routine district visit. He noticed the moving trucks using the alternate loading procedure and smiled. "Looks like everyone understands the system now." Nathan closed the maintenance binder. "People usually support good rules once they understand why they exist." The inspector nodded. "That lesson has traveled well beyond this neighborhood." Before driving away, he looked once more at the bridge standing peacefully above the slow winter creek. "It is remarkable," he said quietly, "how one carefully documented decision can improve an entire community." As evening settled across Cedar Ridge, warm lights glowed from every home while fresh snow continued falling through the silent air. Families crossed the bridge without hesitation because they trusted the engineering, respected the limits, and understood the responsibility shared by everyone who used it. Nathan stood for a moment beside the weathered wooden railing, listening to the gentle sound of the creek flowing beneath the ice. The bridge had never been protected by timber alone. It had always been protected by honesty, preparation, and ordinary people willing to place truth ahead of pride. And that quiet foundation would continue carrying the community forward long after every argument had faded into memory. The first warm days of spring returned to Cedar Ridge almost exactly 1 year after the morning that had quietly changed the neighborhood forever. Clearstone Creek flowed peacefully beneath the same wooden bridge, carrying reflections of budding maple trees and bright blue skies instead of the tension that had once settled over its banks. The 5-ton warning sign remained firmly in place, clean, visible, and respected by every driver who approached the crossing. Delivery companies slowed automatically. Contractors reviewed permits before scheduling equipment. Families crossed the bridge each day without giving the engineering behind it a second thought, and Nathan Brooks considered that the greatest compliment anyone could ever give a structure. Good engineering was supposed to become invisible once people trusted it. One Saturday afternoon, the community gathered beside the creek to celebrate the completion of a new walking trail connecting several sections of the neighborhood. Children laughed as they raced along the path. Neighbors shared homemade desserts beneath white tents, and musicians played gentle acoustic music while the warm breeze carried the scent of fresh grass through the park. Nathan stood quietly near the bridge, helping a young volunteer adjust one of the informational signs explaining the history of the crossing and the importance of preserving privately maintained infrastructure. The volunteer looked at Nathan with curiosity. "Did you really build all of this?" Nathan smiled softly. "Many people helped. I simply accepted the responsibility for keeping it safe." Nearby, Diane Collins welcomed new residents arriving for the celebration. Her leadership had changed in ways everyone could see. She no longer introduced herself by explaining rules. She began every conversation by listening. Before the ceremony officially started, she walked toward Nathan carrying a small wooden plaque, wrapped in simple blue ribbon. "The board voted unanimously," she said. "We wanted to place this beside the bridge if you approve." Nathan carefully unwrapped the plaque. It contained only a single sentence engraved beneath a small illustration of the bridge. "Integrity protects what strength alone cannot." Nathan looked at the words for several quiet moments before smiling. "This belongs to the community." Diane gently shook her head. "It belongs here because you reminded all of us what responsibility looks like." Harold Benson stepped beside them and laughed softly. "You know, nobody even argues about the bridge anymore." Nathan looked across the creek, where families continued walking peacefully from one side to the other. That was always the best possible outcome. Just then, the chief structural engineer arrived with the familiar county bridge inspector, both dressed casually while attending the community celebration as invited guests rather than officials responding to a complaint. The engineer shook Nathan's hand warmly. "Every annual inspection since last year has been excellent," he said. "Your bridge continues to set the standard." Nathan thanked him with the same quiet humility he had shown from the beginning. The standard was always there. We simply followed it. As the afternoon sunlight reflected across the calm water below, the new plaque was carefully mounted beside the bridge entrance beneath the familiar 5-ton warning sign. Children paused to read it before continuing across the bridge with their parents. No one spoke about the overload incident anymore because the lesson had already become part of everyday life. The bridge never needed to prove its strength again. Neither did the man who cared for it. True foundations were never measured only by timber, steel, or engineering calculations. They were measured by character, preparation, honesty, and the quiet courage to protect others even when nobody understood why. Long after reports were filed, meetings concluded, and arguments disappeared, those values continued carrying every traveler safely across the creek, reminding everyone who passed that the strongest bridge any community could ever build was the one connecting truth with trust, responsibility with respect, and quiet dignity with lasting peace.